many of you have probably heard that Mark and I took a trip, and our trip was to Greece, Croatia, and Slovenia. And this is a trip we've never taken before. We've never done anything like it. And we were so amazed at how beautiful it was. But one of the things, we went on a bunch of tours. So we did some walking tours, we did some bus tours. And one of the things that hit all of us was when someone said different dates. Like, this happened in 500 BC, or this happened in 800 BC. Or one day we were driving in a bus, and the tour guide said, if you look out the left window, you'll see this structure. And so we looked out, and this structure was just like rocks, and it was mostly torn down. But the top of it was held together by steel beams. And she told us that this structure was a church from 100 AD. Now, if you think about how old that is, and we kept saying, we thought our country was so old, but look at how old things are there. And so this made me think of, how those people back at that church, how they learned so many lessons from Jesus. And I thought, how did that church withstand time and natural disasters and war? And then I thought, we have actually passed down so many things over the past 2,500 years that Jesus has taught us. So it made me really think about the passage of time. So back in those days, Jesus stood up for his followers as a protector and an advocate. And he has taught us to do the same thing in this time and place. So if you will pray with me, please. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. So the scripture that Peyton read today is pretty familiar. If you would ask somebody, they could probably tell you kind of the situation that was going on there. But if you remember, Mary is the sister of Martha and Lazarus. And she has just seen this incredible thing happen. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. And so as Lazarus' sister, she is filled with gratitude. She needs to thank Jesus in some kind of profound way. And the way that she chooses, and if you remember back in those days, it was kind of a custom to wash feet. So we'll talk about that again in a minute. But she decides to wash Jesus' feet with nard. And this is a very expensive perfume. And, it wasn't the kind that you can buy at Walmart. Or that you can get those little cans and spray. This was very, very expensive. So a little bit about nard. So in those days, they traded a lot of perfumes. And the spikenard plant is nard. And the essential oils come from the stem that's underground and the roots. And so it was kind of expensive, I guess, to dig it up and do all of those processes to it. But when you had perfume, it could indicate social status. And so when you had this type of perfume, you would think that this was, nobility. So I was thinking about how much this would cost in today's world, and we heard Peyton read that it was 300 denarii. So let's say that, a wage back in Jesus' time was one denarii. So you'd have to work 300 days to be able to pay for this perfume. So let's say today, just as an example, let's do easy math, $50, that's your daily wage, and for 300 days, how much would that be? $15,000. So we're not talking about Walmart perfume here. So I think that Mary, when she was looking around, how could she really honor Jesus? So She decided to use this nard as a symbol of deep respect and devotion to him. And feet washing, as I said earlier, was a really important practice. People walked on dusty roads, and most of the time they had on either sandals or they were barefoot. So they, their feet got dirty really easily. So this was a way of showing a visitor that they were welcome in their home. So people just would leave a bowl of water so you could wash your feet. Or if they had a servant, they would have them, somebody of lower social status, they would have them wash the feet. But in this case, and it also demonstrates, no matter who you are, if you're the homeowner, it demonstrates the fact that you are willing to be respectful and care for your visitors. So in this case, Mary is washing Jesus' feet. And she's using this very costly perfume. But it wasn't just the two of them there, was it? Who else was there? Judas Iscariot that Peyton read about. Now, Judas Iscariot was one of the disciples, and he was not happy at all with this decision to use this nard. He questioned why a significant, something that costs so much, so significant, why would you use that to wash someone's feet? And so initially you think, oh, well, that's a really good question because, he's being socially conscious. But as you look a little bit farther, you can see this may not actually be his motive. So Judas is the keeper of the money bag. He's the treasurer. He's the one who, has all the power because he's holding onto this money bag. And he's entrusted with the financial resources of Jesus and his followers. But you can kind of see a little bit about Judas's character because Judas takes a little bit from the money bag, steals a little bit of money from the money bag. And so in this part, we can kind of see that his priorities or his motives may be a little bit different than we originally thought. He was probably more concerned with material goods and with the power that went along with the money. So now we've got Mary washing Jesus' feet. We've got Judas Iscariot. And there was this moment in this scene where Judas says, "Why are you doing this?" And Mary didn't even have a chance to answer. Jesus answered for her. He defended her in that moment. He said, "Leave her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial." Jesus is advocating for Mary. So his defense is very profound to me. When I read this, that was the thing that stuck out the most to me. He affirms Mary's devotion, and he emphasizes that true worship transcends any societal norms or expectations. Jesus champions those who are marginalized or criticized. We have this unique church here. And it's different from any other church I've ever been a part of, whether I was a member or I just attended. And it's hard to explain to other people what our church is like. And I have a EHS table, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality table. And we were talking, I don't really know what we were talking about, but I was trying to explain to them what this church was like for me. And Elaine can verify that I really didn't know how to do that. So I've been thinking about how do I define this church? How do I explain it? And this is the best I came up with, and I'll have to work on it some more, but it is a church where people are authentic, where people care about each other, where people come to feel loved, and where people can come to feel at home. That doesn't encompass all of it, but that was the words that I came up with for today. Now, we're all kind of in the same boat. But I want to talk really quickly. I have Louise and Richard Sadler's permission to talk about this. I wanted to show you an example that happened just this week about advocating for someone. So we have a gentleman named Robert. If you're here at 8:15, 8:30 over in the fellowship hall, you probably met Robert. Robert is, he's tall, slender, he's very friendly. He's been coming, I don't know, maybe over a year. And at first, he didn't really engage that much, but Richard and Louise kind of took an interest in him. And when I talked to them about it, it was an interest that they felt like God was pushing them to take. So they were listening for what they should do, and they did it. And so they've been helping on and off different things for Robert. One of the things that happened to Robert was that he had a tent that he lived in, and some boys decided that they just would burn this tent down. So then Robert was left with no place to go, no shelter. And Richard and Louise decided that he needed a tent. And I bet they could find a tent somewhere down here. They called around. They found a tent for Robert. So time has gone by. They've, provided little things here and there. And just this week, Louise came in when Claire and Leslie and I were having a meeting, and she said, "I just have to tell you this." Tears in her eyes. And she said, "Robert got a letter that said he's going to get money because he was a veteran." Robert had no ID. He had nothing to show who he was. Louise and Richard sat down with him on the computer and typed everything in, and they thought, oh my gosh, this is not gonna work. They waited weeks and weeks and weeks, and it happened. And that's what it's called, advocating for someone. And all of us can do that, every single one of us in here. So to me, this church loves like Jesus. We care for the hungry. We care for those who are sick. We care for those who are mourning. We care for the children. And we advocate like Jesus taught us to do. So the definition of an advocate: someone who pleads the cause of another. That's a good thing to remember, isn't it? Someone who pleads the cause of another. So when we mess up, or we're just in a bad situation where justice is clearly not being seen, Jesus has taught us by example, by standing up for Mary, to do the legwork, which is the title of my sermon. Do the legwork. I bet you wondered where that was going to go, right? So Jesus taught us to pursue justice. He physically and spiritually rescued those in need. And we can too. Many in this church, probably almost everyone in this church, already does some legwork. But let's not forget that we need to continue to be on the lookout for those in our community who are on the margins or who are penalized for no reason, so that we go do the legwork and be called an advocate too. So be it, and so it is. Amen.